Welcome to Growth, powered by FareHarbor, where we explore the strategies behind thriving tour and activity businesses. Whether you're just starting out or scaling up, this podcast is packed with insights to help you succeed. Now, here's your host, FareHarbor's Community Manager, Rebecca Costley.
All right. Hello, audience. Hello, growth powered by FareHarbor. We are coming in at you today. I have a really great episode in store for us today. I have two very knowledgeable men graciously accepted to be on with me today, and that is Brandon Evans and Dalton Barton. How are y'all doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for having us.
Doing well.
Awesome. Me and Dalton, I know, are in Denver. Brandon, where are you located?
Currently, I'm in Calgary, Canada, the Denver of Canada, basically.
Is it the Denver of Canada? Is that what that is?
We're just east of the Rockies. Similar, culture, similar vibe. I've been to both cities, so it really is a similar city, just the Canadian version.
Nice. I've always loved our Canadian clients. They really are. They live up to their expectation of just how kind they are. It is absolutely
very true.
Yeah. Awesome. And Dalton, you're here in Denver enjoying. So Yep. I was saying that because here in Denver, we're having the most beautiful fall weather this season. So I'm definitely going to try to escape to the mountains this weekend. Dalton, are you a leaf peeper?
A little bit. Yeah, I got to take advantage of that back in the Northeast last week, but I'm also going camping this weekend. And I was just bragging to Brandon about how unseasonably warm it is. Normally we're bundling up if you're still camping in late September, but it looks like we'll be good.
A true Coloradan, ready to camp. Yeah. I've been in Colorado my whole life, and I can't speak to that. I can't camp. I don't know if I feel uncomfortable being in a bear's living room, but it's great to have you two on. Dalton, I've worked with you pretty extensively back when I was an account manager with Clear Sky Tourism. Brandon, we're new friends, but I have, stalked you in our CRM, and I see that you work with our clients quite often. I'd love to hear a little fun fact about you two, a little bit about Clear Sky and exactly what your company is and kind of your background. Brandon, I'll start with you.
The reason I'm with Clear Sky is I love travel. I love traveling, whether it's learning about cultures or just excursions, stuff like that. I got into it when I was young. I studied abroad and ended up working abroad. I've lived in 4 or 5 different countries now. And then eventually that led me to working for a luxury travel company for 7 years. Eventually got out of that and came to Clear Sky to help with, SEO marketing for all these awesome travel companies or travel tourist service companies. Fun fact about me?
Yeah, you have to make sure it's fun. It can't just be a fact. It has to be fun.
I don't know.
I see a guitar back there. Are you, can you, whip up a Taylor Swift song or?
No, I'm actually one of those people where they say it's never too late to learn. And I decided about 2 years ago to pick it up. And so I'm very much an amateur, but I am on and off playing, and it's really difficult. I pay a lot of respect for the guitarists out there because it is not an easy instrument. But other than that, I'm married to a Canadian. We have an international relationship. That's why I'm here in Canada, even though I'm American. So I might be getting...
Canada, is that Tim Hortons? Right?
Tim Hortons is in Canada. Yes, and ironically, it's owned by an American company now.
Oh, typical.
I know.
Yeah,
typical.
classic.
Dalton, you're up. Make sure it has to be a fun one. Can't just be a fact.
Yeah, we'll maybe save the fun for kind of after talking about how I got here. So I previously spent 2 years at FareHarbor, and now kind of what feels like the old days or way back of FareHarbor. So I spent 2 years when we first started the account management department, and just really fell in love with this industry and working with the tour operators as clients. And then in doing that, had a lot of conversations with them about their experience working with their marketing agencies. And unfortunately, few of those were positive experiences. So then it just kind of seemed that, not everybody should be having a bad time. And prior to FareHarbor, I had spent a handful of years in marketing post-graduate school, and then just kind of decided that, I would try to fill what seemed like a void in the conversations I had with my clients. So I started that in 2019, and here we are now. In the fun fact, in that time, I had the opportunity to take a little bit of a step back, or slightly less demanding role, I'll say, and got to backpack around the world for 12 months to 23 different countries. So that was pretty cool. That was a life highlight so far.
Did you find yourself in any precarious, crazy situations where you were like, have to fight for your life?
Yeah, some, I would say by no fault of my own, incidental run-ins with the law in Guatemala where they pulled over the bus I was on, and in the middle of nowhere. I was the only non-local or non-Spanish speaking person on the bus. So there was not a bit of English that was spoken or to help understand what was going on. And fortunately, the police were actually looking for a different bus. So they received word of that, and we got to be let off. But that was a really scary hour, just in the jungle in Guatemala.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
See, Brandon, that's a fun fact. That's a good.
Yeah. I have been frisked. I have been in a foreign country and just been pulled over and just whole car search for no reason. You're just like, all right,
gosh.
Can't find anything
over there.
Yeah.
It has not happened to me yet, but you know what? Who knows? Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You really delivered on that one. Thank you for that. I threw that at you out of nowhere. All right. Well, where I have worked with Clear Sky a lot, maybe some of our listeners have listened to have worked with Clear Sky a lot. I know when I was an account manager working with Clear Sky, I got very clear direction with you all on like how to optimize my client's book form or we even had a lot of conversations on a call together with my client at times that were so productive. But if I were a listener to this episode today and I have no idea who Clear Sky Tourism is, how would you describe what Clear Sky does and who you are?
Simply, we're a marketing agency for tour operators. And so that focus just kind of came with my previous time at FareHarbor. FareHarbor's, of course, that's a specialty, providing the booking software for tour operators, tours, activities, and rentals. Took that exact same industry focus and then just applied that to a marketing agency. So that is still the only thing that we focus on. Then with that, our services were designed to, one, start where FareHarbor stops. So coming from FareHarbor and being very familiar with everything that an operator gets from their FareHarbor dashboard, sites team, SEO team, et cetera, and then kind of continue from there. And so kind of with that said, our primary focus is on search engine optimization, on the Google search side of things. And then we kind of pad outside layers that are meant to just kind of overall enhance the entire web presence. But the Google search side of things is where we spend our time.
That's the overlords over at Google is what I always call them.
Yeah, we're playing their game and we know it.
Yeah, for better or worse, right?
Right.
Given that diverse and vast experience that you both have, what do you believe sets your approaches to marketing apart, especially in such a competitive space as tourism? So Dalton, you touched on that you could have, two surfing companies and they're both competitors in the same area and one strategy is working for the other and it's not working at all for the other one. That's really interesting to me. So yeah, like I said, given your approaches to marketing, how in the space as competitive as it is in tourism, what do you believe sets those clients apart from each other and how does Clear Sky approach those types of situations?
Yeah, so tourism it's definitely competitive from client to client. So we have a rule that we don't work with two clients who are doing the same thing in the same area. That would be a conflict of interest. But then in terms of competition for Clear Sky, when I started the company, like I mentioned, the reason was because it felt like there was a void. It didn't feel like there was, or at least a lot of other marketing agencies out there that were specializing in tourism. And we know, and our clients know this especially, that their businesses are so like any others who are not in the tour operator space. There's just so many nuances that come with tourism, from the seasonality, whether you have multiple dips and peaks if you're in Hawaii, or like I mentioned, if you're in a colder area, you have a hard shutdown in Labor Day, or if you're in somewhere maybe South Carolina, there's a little bit more of a tail off from end of August until kind of mid-October maybe. So on the seasonality side, but then also as a tour operator, you're a local business appealing to a national audience, or trying to. And a lot of other marketing agencies might focus on a local business trying to appeal to a local audience, right? Yeah. If you're maybe a typical brick and mortar store or an auto shop or something along those lines where you're focused on repeat customers or those who are familiar with the area, or maybe you're working with, let's say, a clothing brand who is national, right? You're maybe not in one place, and so then you're appealing to a national audience. So being local and appealing national, there's just a lot of things to understand with that. And so we really think that unless you're focused on just tourism industry, there's a lot of things that you just don't get. So we feel like that's something that sets us apart and allows us to then kind of go deeper into those levels of understanding why is this surf school in New Jersey different from the one in Hawaii.
Yeah, like the Hawaii surf school might, they're getting people from Texas and New York are taking these Hawaiian vacations. Maybe the Jersey one's more from the outer states that are doing road trips. It's just a different market. It's a different, experience that people are looking for. So understanding that's really important for sure.
That's a good point where you said understood. How do you understand those differences as a tour operator? Obviously, we see on site the people that come in, but if I want to look at that stuff, it can be a little daunting figuring out that audience, understanding my audience and wanting to target my audience. Do you all help clients in understanding and targeting audiences?
I think it's a little bit of both. One, it's just about talking to the client and them communicating with us, the clients that they have, the customers they have. Two, there is data that shows, for example, one thing actually FareHarbor provides, which is really nice, is how far out people are booking. And typically, the closer to the booking date, you can assume they're already in the city, and that behavior is different than someone that's months out booked it. And that it just tells you a difference in the market. People that book it months out, they probably did their research, they're excited, they're on a vacation. People that are kind of doing it like 2 days, 3 days before, they're just kind of doing it on a whim, maybe heard about it. And so you do have to kind of design your website a little differently, right? People months out, you probably want to provide a lot more information and allow people to build trust, especially if it's a big purchase. For a couple days before, they're doing it on a whim, you might want to get them closer to the booking button, like the CTA box or something like that, with some quick information, maybe some quick sort of video content or something that kind of excites them right off the bat and make more of an impulsive decision. And yeah, so there's that.
Yeah. So Brandon, you did a good point touching on how we can use data to try to figure out some of the more technical components of who these people are and what that buyer journey looks like. But the first thing you mentioned I think is also key. It's in talking to the clients. The clients most of the time having these conversations with them, they understand their customer base, I think, a lot better than maybe they think they do. Because there's a lot of data on Google Analytics, we can see where people are coming from, but knowing who that demographic is, not just, okay, a lot of them are coming from South Jersey, Philly, maybe around New York City area, that type of thing. But then understanding, are these families who are spending a week down there and are vacation rentals Saturday to Saturday? So most people are transitioning in and out on Saturdays. Or, are they mostly couples or solo travelers or bachelor and bachelorette parties? And then knowing that demographic really helps us then kind of use the data like Brandon was saying. Bachelor parties are going to plan pretty far out in advance, right? Solo travelers, I was one for a while. I'm not looking at what I'm going to do until 2 days before I get there. So that also putting those two together definitely helps us kind of understand the whole puzzle a lot.
Those are great points. Thank you both for that. Let's keep looking into SEO, talking about SEO, obviously. What do you think tour operators should expect in terms of changes or trends in SEO in 2025?
So one thing is, like I said, the travel industry is growing and people are traveling more and more. Flights are getting more, there's more routes, there's more affordability. So therefore there's more room for certain things like, maybe back in the day, there was like one surf lesson company in this entire town. Now there's maybe 4 or 5. So there's more competition, and being in the forefront of SEO and ranking and, beating out your competitors it's going to be important for your business. I think the other part about the future you got to think about is the internet is bigger than ever. I mean, remember 10, 20 years ago, there's probably, millions of websites. Now or millions or billions. Now there's trillions of websites. So Google has to sift through that and still give you a response in the same amount of time as it did 10 years ago, which is amazing when you think about you type something in and within the second, you have all these results after sifting through trillions of websites, essentially. So you do have to think about that as competition as well. And then the other thing I think that's really important for the future especially with all this AI, is just honest content. We love to rely on certain AI tools, but there comes a point which I highly disagree with relying on it, and that's when it comes to trying to be honest about recommendations or what to expect for these things. Sometimes AI is wrong. It doesn't know. It doesn't know the human experience. So I think going forward, if you're writing about what to expect on an ATV tour or something like that on a blog, yeah, if you need to use AI to kind of structure it, but for sure go in and be as honest as possible. And I do think Google does reward that. It rewards, especially as AI grows and people start using it more, it's going to kind of sift through that. And these Google updates are trying to go after AI to some extent. So we do have to be careful with that going forward.
AI freaks me out, and yet I love it.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Dalton?
I would just say, so Brandon was kind of touching on shifts in tourism. So we know that people are, like you said, are traveling more and more, we expect that to continue as social media has really added to the popularity of going to do things that look really good in pictures that you can share with other people, right? That's not changing anytime soon. We also are hearing, we can kind of see based on advertisements that we're seeing maybe more frequently than we used to for OTAs like TripAdvisor and Viator and Get Your Guide, that those seem to be getting more popular with users. So whereas our focus for our clients is trying to drive more direct bookings, we're also keeping in mind that there seems to be at least a little bit now a behavioral shift towards people who are looking for easier ways to compare. So if that means having your listings on Google Things to Do, which Google has been rolling out a little bit more slowly than some of our clients and us would like them to. But we hope that that's going to continue going in the right direction for us, with them having added that category about this time last year. So having to stay up on top of things like that, and also knowing that technology as a whole just continues to accelerate, right? So being, and like Brandon was saying, that now there's just more competition in terms of websites. So there's only still going to be 5 in the top 5. Right? But now there are hundreds of others below that. So the average person's rankings are going to dip unless you're being proactive to keep up. It's kind of sitting where you used to work. I have clients tell me that they said, back a handful of years ago when I first started this, we did a little bit of SEO, just had a decent, pretty good looking website, and they did fine. But now, like same thing in athletics, when there's more sports science behind your training, well, then you kind of have to do the same thing in order to keep up, right? And so goes the same thing in marketing.
Interesting. Yeah. At what point do you think a tour operator should consider bringing in a third-party marketing agency? Do you think that's like a revenue benchmark, or is that decision more context-driven?
I think it's a great question. One that I get asked a lot, maybe not necessarily by clients that we're working with, by ones that we have in the first conversation and they're not yet sure if they're ready for it, or kind of what their next or initial steps should be. So I would say it's not so much based on revenue or hitting certain benchmarks in the business as it is on can they afford it, right? Because marketing is at least designed to, and most of the time will level you up. Right? That's what it should do. So, and again, we say results may vary, right? But we always try to do the best for our clients. But as soon as you can start investing in something that's designed to help your business, well, then you should. So it's if you can afford it, then probably time to start having that conversation. I think then the second question is, do I hire somebody in-house? Maybe somebody like a lot of our clients are saying, somebody who's younger, much smarter with social media and the internet than they may be, or do you hire out for an agency? Even before being on the agency side, and now especially, it just makes way more sense to hire an agency than it does to hire in-house. You can look at it both in terms of cost and the experience that you're getting or quality that you're getting. So for us, for example, our monthly costs for our clients are between $1,000 and $2,000, vast majority of the time. And with that, you're getting a team of roughly a dozen people who, like Brandon, are experts in their specific respective field. And in some cases, a couple experts in a respective field for $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Or if you hire in-house, you're paying at least $4,000 a month for someone who, at the 48, 50,000 annual is going to be maybe moderately good at a few different things or at one thing. So it's just, whether with us or another agency, always makes more sense, I think, to outsource, and you're just getting a team versus one person and at a lower cost.
Yeah. And even if that in-house person's really good, are they going to produce, for twice the cost, are going to produce twice as much of the results? At what point, what's the threshold? The other thing too is you're paying $1,000 to $2,000 a month. We're using all these tools that we paid for. We're using, different things that you don't necessarily want to take on yourself, because so you have to hire the person, right, the in-house, and then you have to pay for these tools that they need. So that also costs. So I do think you're kind of getting a good bang for the buck. And also just I don't know, if you own a house, it's nice to hire a plumber sometimes instead of doing it yourself, right? So there's just, it's one of those things. And the other thing too is, going back to the question of when. So SEO for sure is not a overnight or even a few weeks results. We have had clients come on and they're just like, why aren't we having results a week in? We're like, and Dalton mentions it on the onboarding, saying give it a couple months at least. It takes time. Google's been ranking these other competitors for a while. Why do you come in, make a few changes, and they get pop you to the top? That's not fair to these other competitors that are doing well. So for sure, months ahead of when your high season is, definitely start getting it going, because you want to be ranking well when the high season comes in, not hire when the high season starts and hope that it catches up during. Because if you only have 3 months out of the year, summer, and you start in June, you might not be ranking well until August, September, and that's over. So something to really think about.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch on seasonality a little later, but I think that's a great point to really leverage those off seasons to start on these projects. Because if you want to see that payoff, it sounds like you should be proactive rather than reactive, right? Am I right to assume that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now,
it's an investment.
I totally understand that. And I used to work, before I was at FareHarbor, which it seems like I've always been here, but before I was at FareHarbor, I was actually at a website builder. And that was kind of when we were seeing this big boom of people pursuing their passions, and everyone could make a website. It was a really interesting time. I'm sure y'all remember. And on this particular platform, and I'm sure our competitors were the same at the time as well, you were able to go in as the user and do DIY SEO. And it had you could adjust things like your heading tag and your icon for Google Chrome tabs, etc. For those people who just kind of follow those types of wizards, SEO wizards, when they're building their website from scratch, have you noticed some things that are left out in those situations? I'm curious. Or is there anything that you see for clients who come to you and they've been doing everything themselves that you commonly see done wrong? Maybe one or two things?
Yeah, I mean, we mostly get FareHarbor sites, so I can't speak on a massive scale, but there has been a few. And I think that I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to have this cool title for a tour, for example, but it has no keywords implemented. You're just well, no one's going to understand what this, or Google is not understanding what this tour is if you're trying to rank for these keywords and you're not really mentioning that. Site structure is a big one. I think people lose. I'll do a crawl, a website, and there's just pages that aren't connected to anything. They're just floating out there in the middle of the internet. And Google doesn't like that because it wants everything attached and knows that you're part of this big web. And that's when I often try and go and find these floating pages, these orphan pages they call them, and put it back in the website, stuff like that. Even if they do a good job with meta tags and title tags and all that stuff, there's still some more. It depends what tools they're using, right? We use certain SEO tools that can tell us the difference. And this is a good example. The word areas or locations or cities is all similar, but maybe for your specific industry, people are using the word area, typing that more than locations. So it might be better to use the word areas rather than locations. And you might not know that if you don't pay for these tools and do that. And you might think, well, this location sounds nicer. Yeah, but your audience thinks Areas does. So it's just little things like that I've seen, but
That's really
it depends on the level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so Brandon, I don't mean to stump you here. So I asked you what people do wrong. What can people do right, maybe before they get to a point where they can afford that investment? What SEO strategies can the DIYers implement on their own before seeking external help?
Yeah, I think one of the simple ones I like to say is just making sure all the components and links to your site work correctly. Super easy. You don't need to go on the back end. You just pretend you're a user and you click on all the links and you make sure they're going to the right places. You make sure, especially that the call to action boxes, right? If your booking box isn't, or your button isn't working, well, that's a problem. And, we don't get that very often, but if those are simple things, we don't even, you can check as the owner of your own website and pretend you're just a user, because that is important. User, while we want to rank with Google is a search engine for people. And so at the end of the day, it is for people. And so your site has to be, nice for a human. Even having your friends, or send your website to a friend that's, or a family member, and say, hey, can you pretend you're, looking for this, and see how they feel. Another one is meta tags. I would definitely do your research on meta tags. There's so much information on there about it, but it's not hard. Usually sites like FareHarbor, they have a whole back-end system for all these things. And if you just do a little bit of learning, it can go a long ways to ranking. That said, having tools that tell you about keywords and all that stuff can significantly improve that as well. If you want to do in-house, I say definitely get your Google My Business or Google Business profile set up. We've all seen it before, searching something, a restaurant or whatever, and it has that little block on the right. That is something that humans have to set up. A lot of people think it's just Google creating it. No, you have to set that up, have a little description about, what you provide, and that helps build trust. And with the reviews set up, and trust is really important, right? So those are little things that you can do right off the bat. I think the thing where paying an agency comes in is just the maintenance, staying up on it, especially when you're busy in your high season, working with clients on your service that you're providing. You don't have time to, you just had a long day of tours and all this stuff. You don't have time to come home and work on a website for another few hours. So yeah, but there is some initial stuff right off the bat.
Amazing. Dalton, anything to add there?
I think a lot of times, kind of what Brandon was saying, just put yourself in the user's shoes. That's what we do a lot of times as well. And because that's exactly what Google is doing, which Brandon alluded to. And it's thinking about how your customers are finding you, right? If they look at your website, are they going to understand what you mean when you say X, but a client refers to it as Y? I guess one example of that, and this is hard to misconstrue the differences, but for a client that we worked with in Alaska, they refer to them as snow machines, which most of us in the lower 48 will call them snowmobiles. A user could infer that those mean the same thing, but Google doesn't know that those are the same thing. So, do you want to appeal to just people who in Alaska who are searching for your snowmobile rent or snow machine rental versus anybody else in the U.S. Who's looking for a snowmobile rental? Things like that are really important to consider.
Absolutely. And I've never thought of that before, snow machine versus snowmobile.
Yeah.
I'm not, as I pointed out earlier in the episode, I'm not the most outdoorsy person, especially for a Coloradan. And so that's definitely not something I would think of when I'm Googling. I would just put snowmobile. That's all I've ever heard of. Not that I'd be on one.
Well, it kind of applies to anything where, there is colloquial terminology. And if you're traveling, you might call something totally different. I mean, I think in the Midwest, they say pop and we say soda on the West Coast, just little things like that. So it is good to know, you can't always stick to your wording because it's your local thing when you have clients coming in from another part of the country or the world.
I think you mentioned something that I'm a bit of a gossip, so it piqued my interest a little bit. So forgive me if this question's a little out of left field. I once had a client way back in the day when I first started at FareHarbor, and they were paying for a marketing firm, a third party. And I was in their dashboard and I noticed we weren't even tracking their conversions. There was no way that this company was tracking the sales with the way FareHarbor is set up. There was no GA4 code or at that time, Universal Analytics code installed in the dashboard. So I was like, there's no way they're tracking your conversions. How do they know what's working? How are they doing anything if they can't track your return on anything? So my question is, what do you think for those who are listening to this episode and they're like, I have a third-party marketing company already, what are some questions or things that they should know or consider when trying to be like, is this the best fit? Or are they doing what they say they're doing? Are there any questions or points that they should be asking themselves or to their third-party marketing company?
Yeah, I just had this conversation with a prospective client last week. And so she was running Google Ads with another marketing company, currently using them. And her question was, could they be doing better? Or does it make sense to switch to our company was the thought that she had. And so I asked, I said, well, kind of here's our process. But right now, what has you thinking you want to switch? Is it, do you not feel like you're getting a great ROI or, a great return? Because with Google Ads, that's really what it comes down to, right? There's few other things, especially in tourism, that our clients care about more than, does the revenue make sense for what I'm paying? It really just boils down to that, as it does for most small business owners. And in this industry, all the clients we work with typically are small business owners. So that was the first question I asked her. And she's like, well, I don't know. And I said, okay, that's definitely something you want to understand. You're putting money into this. I highly encourage that you have an idea of how well it's performing. So then we started emailing for that, and she asked, okay, well, what question do I ask them exactly? And I said, start with, how well are the ads doing? And to see what, how they respond to that or what their answer is. So then she forwarded me an email from them, and what they were measuring was, we've had 18 conversions on $2,000 ad spend over the last, let's say, 4 months. And I said, okay, next question, what are they counting as conversions? So then the response was phone calls and bookings. And then, so the next question is kind of to your point, how are they measuring the bookings? Do they have these codes set up? So, and then it kind of got to a point where it's a little over most people's head, unless you're very technical savvy and work in the industry, you wouldn't necessarily know how to ask those questions. I think that's maybe where a lot of marketing companies kind of get away with not being fully transparent, because the client doesn't know how or what level of transparency they should have. So basically trying to help her get answers to those. And then what they came back with, this company actually did have a code installed, which was good. And then so they cutting out those number of conversions that they considered to be phone calls and not knowing the result of, and then looking strictly at bookings, they had converted roughly 4x ROI. And so then the client and I had the conversation, okay, you're making 4x right now. What are your profit margins? Is that something that is satisfactory to you? Or do you want to consider maybe trying out somebody else, in which case you have no idea what their results are going to be? So it's, do you want to trade 4x for a question mark? For some clients, yes. For some, no. She decided not to. And so we just kind of wrapped it up. I was like, okay, just glad I was able to help you understand that, and best of luck.
I think that says a lot about integrity, which I know FareHarbor is one of our core values. So that's great. It's all in. Brandon, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely just, if you are hiring someone to do this, request data. I mean, even if you don't quite understand it, have them make you understand it. Because you're spending your money, you should be able to, in order to get more money back. So, Dalton sometimes will request some graphs from me, or something to show that there's an increase in this. Or also, sometimes we get clients that request specific, like maybe they do snorkel and scuba and a boat charter, and they're like, well, we're doing pretty good with 2 of the 3, and we want the scuba to increase. Okay, well, if you're going to spend money on that, pay attention. Are you getting more scuba sales? Right? Are you seeing it, like, from a personal level? On boots on the ground, are you seeing it? So there's always that. But yeah, requesting data and having them explain it to you, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I would gladly get on a call with a client, and if they have questions, they want me to go over, like, is this working? Is this not? Why not? Why is it? And what can we do? So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that. One thing I've noticed with our clients is there's quite a bit of clients that run year round, but for instance, I had a client once that had a ranch. They did horseback riding, and it was really difficult for them to manage. Well, we operate year round, but we have we have peak season, and then we have some seasons that perform pretty well, and then we don't perform super well. For example, when it's like so hot outside, people don't typically want to go on a horseback ride when the sun is beating down on them. So it brings up questions about like seasonality and how that can play into SEO and what I should be changing, if I should be changing anything on my website, when I should be changing it. Brandon, you touched on visuals. So for example, with this client, they were like, in our area, it's actually so beautiful during the fall, and it's not our peak season, but it's so beautiful. I wonder if people knew how beautiful it was, if we would get more bookings this time of year. So I wonder when I should be changing my website. So with that kind of context, what advice do you all have for seasonality?
Yeah.
How should they be thinking about change in seasonality, any type of season change?
It depends on your business. So for example, we have some companies that run year round, but they run summer and winter activities like snow and summer activities. So on that behalf, you definitely want to keep your marketing up and just make sure we shift. So like right around now, actually, I'm going to start shifting towards winter activities because it takes a few months. So right around October, November, I want to be setting up for all these snowmobiling tours and private cross-country skiing tours and stuff like that. But then if you're a company that just, from spring through Labor Day, you have a hard stop and you see a huge drop, it's still so important to stay alive, especially if your competitors are doing it. I mean, if Google sees this website and then for 8 months or 6 months, nothing changes, nothing really happens, it's kind of going to feel like you disappeared a little bit, especially if your competitors are still posting blogs or staying up on like maybe some changes. And then there's the side of just because it's off season doesn't mean people aren't thinking about, what they're going to do ahead of time. So, it might be November, Thanksgiving, you got a little time off and you're excited for spring already. And you're like, maybe I'm thinking about going out to Hawaii or, this lake area and renting a boat. Let me do some research. And so if you keep your website alive and keep those rankings up, they might be thinking about you and they see that brand and your website, and then when it comes time, they see that again. They go, oh yeah, I remember looking at them back in Thanksgiving. And so it upholds that trust. So I do think it's important whether you have a really obvious highs and lows or kind of a different industry throughout the year to stay alive on that. I don't want it to come off like I'm trying to keep like a sales thing going for us, but as someone who has been working in this, if you want your business to grow or year over year, you do need to keep it up. I totally understand. Dalton does too, as the sales guy. Sometimes we do have clients like right now who are stepping down in packages. So we're like, they're paying for the high package to get, their high season going. And now they're stepping down and kind of just keep the engine running and idling. Totally fine. I understand that. It's lower cost for your off season, but nonetheless, dropping off completely and coming back in 6 months, you do see a whole different, there's a whole different result for that.
Is it contextual on when you should be prepping for these seasonality changes? Like, should I be changing my photos or my heading tags or anything like that ahead of fall or summer if I operate year round?
Yeah, like if the one in Park City I was talking about, spring came around and we started preparing for summer, Dalton made a good recommendation on their main homepage. They have like a visual slider. So it's just like these photos. And, the slider likes to go from these, mountain biking to maybe snow skiing or whatever, snowmobiling. Well, for sure, you definitely want the user to land if winter's coming up and they're looking for snowmobiles. Well, yeah, they want to land on something that clearly has like a snowmobile or something similar instead of like, kayaking. And they're like, whoa, I'm not even looking for that. And there's a huge picture right in front of me of like a kayak. And it's like, okay, even though the letter says snowmobile. So there's definitely some of that. And it doesn't take that long to change. And when we're talking, that's a 10-minute change right there, or asking your developer to do. So there's little things like that, just amping up the pages, focusing more on the pages that, coming into that season. So, yeah.
So Brandon touched on really nicely and why we encourage investing in SEO during the off season. But on the ad side, that's something we don't encourage continuing. So now, and Brandon also alluded to, when clients are kind of taking a step down in the packages that we offer. So going from being all in during the season when you really are all in on everything, to then let's cut the advertising when people aren't actively booking. So sure, people may be looking, especially in a couple months leading up to the season, or they've got some time over Christmas break, let's say, and they're just daydreaming about what summer vacation might look like. But there's not a high level of intent at that time. And so with Google ads and with Facebook ads, in order for those to drive an ROI for themselves, there needs to be a high level of intent behind it. There needs to be a high kind of balance or a high proportion of people who are looking that are actually going to book. So especially for, let's say, kind of talking about springtime. So right now we're dialing back. We're turning ads off for most of our clients who are ending their season. But then come spring, a lot of clients will pose a good question and they'll say, okay, I'll start up, kind of after Easter, things start to pick up a little bit and then continue through May, and then Memorial Day really kicks things off. So should I then start advertising in March, maybe for things to start building in April? And most of the time, the answer is no, because there's just still, this many more people looking and this many who are ready to book. And as the spring goes on, once that starts to tilt a little bit more towards people who are willing to book, and again, that's going to drive the ROI on these ads, then at that time, then we consider, maybe a month out from when the season really kicks off is when we might think of that. And we just know that based on experience. Right. It took trial and error. It took running ads in February for a season that doesn't start until May, seeing that they're not active. They're not doing a whole lot until late April, to then kind of understand, which is, just one of the things that we enjoy focusing on this industry and get to see as the years go on and understand seasonality better each year.
That's awesome. I know we're coming to the end of the episode, so thank you both so much for your time. One of my final questions, I promise, is a little bit, I kind of thought as we talked about seasonality, I suddenly thought of, Black Friday is almost here. How does that play into paid ads? And how does that play into strategy when it comes to SEO and kind of everything y'all handle? How do you handle those kinds of promotions? And maybe do you have any tips for those who are listening to this episode and thinking about doing some type of seasonal promotion? How should that be handled in the realm of SEO and paid ads?
Yeah, so I think Black Friday is typically, at least in our experience, not hugely popular of a time for clients to run promotions. Some do. A lot might wait until it's time for Christmas, and then they might discount gift certificates or gift cards for the following summer, because there are more people who are buying gifts for others than there are who are shopping Black Friday for themselves, typically. So in doing that, or whether it's we have a client who has some winter offerings, so the season it's kind of ramping up for him, and he's offering an early bird discount. So kind of a couple different components that come when we do that. So for one, that discount needs to be built out in FareHarbor. So you have to work with your FareHarbor account manager support team to make sure that is set up and operating in the way that the client envisions it going. And then support might also, or FareHarbor might tell them, well, how about we do it this way instead? Which they can make those recommendations because they've done it 1,000 times. Secondly, you would want to then get that advertisement out there. So either in Google or Facebook ads. It's easy times when you can change the headline versus messing with your, the title tag of your homepage to say 30% off for just a month and then change it back. Kind of, confuses Google a little bit. Brandon would shoot me down if I made that recommendation or suggestion to him. But then make that visible on the website. So once somebody finds that in an ad, then they come to the website. The website's going to confirm the discount that they just saw. Then they're going to get to the FareHarbor book form, and then it again, they might have a slashed out price or an opportunity to then add the promo code. So it needs to be at each of those steps. But I think it starts with getting it out in a Facebook or Google advertisement otherwise, and at a time when people are looking. Right. So again, Facebook ads, we talked about when people aren't actively looking for it, but they're in the area. So if you're in Park City and you're appealing to people who are in Park City with social ads at the time, then that's good to do it. But if you think people aren't even looking for you and just travelers aren't in town, well, then it just might not even be a good time to run that ad until things start to pick up in spring.
Awesome. Nailed it as usual, Dalton. Okay, we talked about a lot today. We talked about my business, We talked about paid ads on Meta, on Google Ads. We talked about some technical stuff. That was really great. We talked about some SEO concepts and strategies, some do's and don'ts. So a lot of information we have in this episode here today. So if our listeners want to start improving their SEO or overall online presence today, as soon as they get done listening to this episode, what's one step they could take immediately?
I mean, we kind of touched on this earlier, but basically, again, making sure all those components, links, all that stuff works. That's one of them. Pretend you're a user. It's like one of the easiest things. And then meta tags, I'd say site structure, setting up tracking methods. If you want to pay for those in-house, is SEMrush, GSC, Google Search Console. That's actually free, I think. Those are just ways to see, to track like your performance. And those are all important, making sure that all the things you service or are on there. Yeah, those are the simple things. I'd say the hard part is just the maintenance, really.
Yeah, I liked what you said earlier about how it can be as simple as making sure all your links work is a great one.
Yeah.
Or sending your website to a friend who has never booked with you before, never been on your website before, and see what questions might come up. I think those things are so easy. And sometimes when I'm at Spark, our conference, I'll say that in a presentation and people kind of roll their eyes. But honestly, it's incredibly helpful, I think, to get like some fresh eyes on there and just make sure things work, because it's so easy for things to fly under the radar, especially if you have a pretty broad website.
Yeah, really easy.
Add there, Dalton?
I think Brandon kind of hit on the technical components a lot. And then one of the things he mentioned, when we're talking about SEO, and again, kind of going back to time to start SEO is not Memorial Day. If you're a summer company, right? It's not going to work. It'll put you in great shape for fall if you were still running. So for a lot of clients, I know many of whom just kind of finished the season, and the transition from September to October is just a big exhale, right? And everyone can kind of relax for a little bit, and maybe they don't want to think about too much until after the holidays. And then once we see the year turn on our calendar, then the gears start turning a little bit. But for even a lot of people at that time, it's still, those gears aren't turning too quickly until the weather starts to warm up. But to what Brendan has mentioned about SEO and giving it time, now is the time to get that conversation started. Whether it's you have somebody in-house or it's us or another marketing agency, at least get that conversation going internally, thinking about what strategy for next year might be. So that way maybe you can get things rolling before the end of the year, and then you're giving it all of spring to, again, let it cook, and then you're in a really good position for summer. So that's kind of how we look at the timeline of summer ending to beginning again next year.
Amazing. Thank you both. How can listeners get in touch with Clear Sky Tourism for a consultation or to learn about building their own marketing team? I'm assuming everyone gets a Brandon and everyone gets a Dalton, hopefully, on their side. So how do they get that? How do they get that process started?
For us, so we'll have a specific page on our website that we'll provide the link to, where users can fill out a contact form that will come to me, or they can just shoot me an email. So I'll be the point of contact, for better or worse, I suppose. So I'll be the first person that they chat with, and then the one that they continue chatting with. So we think that makes things pretty easy on the point of contact side of things. So yeah, they can just follow that link in the podcast here, and that'd be the first step to get in touch with us.
Now, Dalton, I'm one for a deal, so I have to ask, do our listeners get any type of special promotion? Do they get anything extra if we're referring them from this podcast episode?
Yeah, well, we couldn't talk about Black Friday and promo codes without and then it's kind of, no, it doesn't apply to us though. So yes, for anyone who contacts me through that link, through that page on our site, or anyone who maybe they want to have a conversation with their account manager first, and then just say, what's your experience with Clear Sky been? And however they get in touch with us after this episode, if they reference the episode or we see they came from that page, then we'll do $250 off the first month of services. So hopefully that can make the entry a little bit easier.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah. Well, again, thank you both for being here. I know we have so much good stuff in this episode. You really over-delivered for me. You're making my job very easy. Okay. So I certainly Brandon, Dalton, thank you so much. Thank you, Clear Sky, as well, for the discount for the clients coming from this episode. And yes, make sure if you liked this episode, listener, you should like, subscribe, maybe even share it if you feel so inclined in the giving spirit. And hopefully by the time this episode comes out, I'll be meeting a lot of our listeners at our conference at Spark, where Dalton, I know you will also be. So maybe people are hearing your voice and they're like, oh my gosh, I just saw that guy on the floor today.
Yeah, I'll be there too.
So both looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
I got added, yeah.
Yes, I love that. Okay, great.
The whole group down New Orleans.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good time. I think we have a record-breaking amount of registrations this year. It's going to be a really great time. So hopefully, maybe we even have some clients listening to this, walking right outside the hotel, listening to some jazz. It's going to be a great time. I look forward to seeing you both there. Again, to all of our clients, prospects, anyone listening today, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.